Okay, welcome back. We are talking in class with Dr. Greg Carr. We're in class with Carr, hashtag in class with Carr. And it's funny because I've been talking for the last couple of weeks about this Henry Bibb fella. And then you
Yes.
asked me, why did I want you to talk about him? And I couldn't remember. Couldn't remember
Yes.
because, the brain is weird. All right. But then I was like, he was born in 1815, right? On
Yes.
a plantation in
Yes.
Kentucky. And
Yes.
somehow he rose to become this wealthy owner of a newspaper. 1815 is a long way from emancipation.
Oh,
So
no question.
my question to you is, how did he get free? Henry Bibb.
That's a good question. Some people might argue that he was never completely free. He spent his life trying to get free. But when you asked me about Henry Bibb, I thought about it immediately after we talked, and I said, wow, that's a great person to talk about, because Henry Bibb does represent what you said. You know, I ask my students often, I say, when do you think Black people started resisting enslavement? Some people might say the Civil War, and they say, oh, well, that was Stono. And then some people they read the lessons, so they read the book, and they'll say something like, well, they've been resisting since the 17th century. I said, Black resistance to enslavement started when the first person who probably looked like us put their hands on somebody and said, come with me. In other words, no, this is not a game of tag. You're a slave. Okay, I'm coming with you. No,
Right.
resistance
right,
is
right,
human.
right, right,
You know
right,
what I'm saying?
right,
We've been fighting.
right.
One of the reasons why they had to have this idea of the patter roller, of the slave patrol, was, in other words, the idea that any white person, and we're seeing it now with your brother in Georgia or the sister in Louisville, any random white person has the right to try to exert control over a Black woman or a Black man or a Black girl or a Black boy's body. The reason that begins is because Black people are not going to submit to enslavement. You better get everybody who look like you to try to stop us. Because the minute you turn your head, you look around, oh no, Reese is gone. You know what I'm saying? The minute you say, okay, I'm going in for the night, you wake up in the morning, the fields are on fire, the cows are gone, and Sambo is in Canada. In other words, we're never going to stop. You know what I'm saying? Bibb is an incredible example of that. Henry Bibb, as you say, born in Kentucky, Shelby County, Kentucky. His mother's enslaved, but his father, he never know, white dude. A white dude, and not just any white dude, he's a state senator. James Bibb in Kentucky. This is apocryphal almost. It's almost like they're saying, we're not sure. Nah, you know who it is. You know who it is. Bibb is...
And his last name is Bibb.
Bibb! Come on. Exactly. Come on now. You're not going to deny, oh my God. But here's the fascinating thing about Henry Bibb. Henry Bibb, 1815, as you say. Now, what's going on in 1815 in the United States? The War of 1812 has just ended. The British come back for the rematch. Kentucky's a border state, and they've got to go west. They're still trying to go west. In fact, what's between Kentucky and the Pacific Ocean? Everybody who was here before any of us came over here, the First Nations, our blood kin, the Native Americans. So you ain't subdued them yet. You still talking about east of the Mississippi. So this slavery thing is still working itself out as part of the settler project we eventually call the United States. Bibb is born in a state that's real tricky because, of course, between Kentucky and Ohio is the Ohio River. Anybody ever been to Northern Kentucky know how that's set up. In fact, go read Beloved, Toni Morrison, or the true story that's based on, the story of Margaret Garner and the Ohio River. You can, and many times I was at Ohio State, I drive home to Nashville, come through Louisville, and you come down that road, 65, and then 70 to 65, and you see, when you cross Cincinnati, you come into Covington, Kentucky. You can see Cincinnati, downtown Cincinnati from Covington. It's right there. So the whole idea for Black people was, if we can get across this Ohio River, we can get free. Because if we can get to Ohio, now they got a network of underground railroad networks, and we'll just keep going till we're free. Henry Bibb, this Negro tried to escape so many times. They sold him, he tried to escape. He tried to escape. He ends up on a plantation with the woman who he marries during enslavement. Of course, it's illegal in Kentucky, so they let him they call him common law. But one of the reasons why some of the plantation owners like, you know what, let him get married. Why? Because if you marry her and they have a child, maybe you won't run.
Stay. Right.
He runs anyway. Bibb, and he don't tell the wife and don't tell the child. But here's why he keeps getting caught. Every time Bibb escapes, he come back to get somebody. He's gonna come get his wife.
Right. Oh, that's why I wanted to bring him up. Before
Yes,
Harriet Tubman, this is what we have, you know, Harriet Tubman, great Moses, Black Moses, beautiful. She wasn't the first to come back.
No.
And that's why, and thank you. This is why I talk to you. I forget
don't
stuff.
make no mistakes.
No, Henry Bibb. Before there was Harriet Tubman, there was Henry Bibb.
Yes.
And the notion of this man being free and continuously coming back speaks about this thing that you and I believe are embarking upon right now.
Yes.
It's not okay that you and I are free. It's a lonely prospect to be free and not have everybody with you. And I know everybody's not going to come, Dr. Carr.
Right.
But damn it, we're going to have to try.
Yeah.
Because
you keep coming back.
Got to keep coming back.
You come back every day and on the weekends too. We on the weekend. You still coming back.
On a Saturday and we still here.
That's right.
And so how many times did he try to come back and get got caught?
Roughly speaking, about a half dozen times. And here's where it's a mess.
Crazy.
Because Bibb, this was about 1833, 34. That's when he gets into common law marriage. Melinda. Mm-hmm. Melinda was his wife's name.
Your brain, man. Yes,
her
name is Melinda.
It's important because the thing is, everybody can read this. This is one of the ones where you don't have to send off to buy the book. Henry Bibb's narrative is available. You can look on the internet and find the narrative of Henry Bibb.
It's a public domain work, right?
That's exactly right. This is a public domain work. Actually, he publishes, I think, 1849. He publishes the narrative of Henry Bibb.
So he published a book about his life.
Oh, well, yeah, but to get there, here's the thing. He keeps coming back. They catch him. They put him in the slave prison one time. They catch him coming back for his wife one time. They're going to sell him down further south. He negotiates to be sold with his wife and children so they can all be together. The thing about enslavement is, because we don't get a chance to study it, we don't understand that it is a human institution. It was the most brutal institution, but you got Black people in this institution who are busting their ass. How you gonna be in the 1830s negotiating with the cat that caught you to say, no, if you're gonna sell me, sell my wife and children with us? In other words, what kind of leverage?
You have no rights,
got?
Right? None.
You know what I'm saying? And yet,
right?
He does it, right? Eventually, he slips away. December 1837, he makes the break again. He doesn't tell him. He keeps going. It's breaking his heart, but he keeps going. This is going to be very important. Here's where the thing goes crazy. In fact, let's bring in a brother who I know you know, Herb Boyd, fellow journalist, right? Herb Boyd wrote a book called Black Detroit. Henry Bibb ends up in Detroit. Bibb is in Detroit. Bibb writes a narrative of his life. Bibb never goes to school in his life except 2 weeks. There's a Black dude in Detroit who has a school. Bibb goes there for 2 weeks. He ends up being one of the great orators. During Henry Bibb's time, he was mentioned in the same breath as Frederick Douglass. In fact, the reports would say Bibb could tell you a story about the brutality of slavery that would have you laughing at one moment, mad at one moment, and crying in the next moment. But Bibb's whole thing was, I think we might have to leave this God-forsaken country. We got to separate. We have to have our own thing because they're never going to stop. Meanwhile, he keeps going back. Eventually, several of his brothers escape. So that, in other words, Kentucky is right there. That's why, and again, for folks who are Toni Morrison fans, like all of us should be, remember in Beloved, the sister got to make a choice. That if we can't make it physically, I'm going to send these babies back to the ancestors. I'm going to let them come back to you. That is the tortured soul at the heart. And remember, baby Seba comes back. You know what I'm saying? The ancestor comes back like, whoa, wait a minute. What did you do? These are the painful choices they got. Can you imagine Henry Bibb? Can you imagine his wife, his children? What's going on? So anyway, then the thing changes. Here's the issue. Now it's 1850. Bibb's living in Detroit. Now, anybody from Detroit, all of your viewers and listeners who for years have followed you, parents, rebels, everybody who knows who's in the Midwest, y'all know, especially y'all, those you got grandma in them, you know what them Negroes do in Detroit on the weekend. They go across the river to gamble at the casino because Canada, Ontario is right across the water from Detroit. Y'all know Detroiters know how y'all do. So in 1850, California applies to be a state. They want to be admitted into the Union. Now, mind you, we are still a decade away from the Civil War, and the South don't want nobody coming in who's not a slave state, because they want to keep slavery going all the way to the West Coast. Remember them, those hillbillies ran out there in what they want to start their own country. They wanted to call it the Republic of Texas. To this day, Texas has one star in its flag. Why? Because they said, we're making this the Republic of Texas.
The Lone Star State.
That's the Lone Star State, but it becomes a state because after Santa Anna and the Mexicans is like, let's just kill them. So in San Antonio at the Alamo, they serve them, Sam Houston, Stephen A. Austin, all Davy Crockett. Now this is wipe them out. The United States government comes in during the 1840s, the Mexican War, and says, we're going to rescue you all, and Texas comes in as a slave state. But guess what? The rule is, if you bring in a slave state in the
Gotta
South,
have a free one.
you got to have a free. Exactly right. California's on the West Coast. They're now got designs to wipe the entire continent and build the settler country called the United States of America. 1850, California comes in. Guess what? Don't have a free state to bring in. So they reach a compromise. The compromise, which replaces the compromise they reached in 1820, which is known as the Missouri Compromise.
The Missouri Compromise was for every slave state, there has to be a free state.
Exactly.
That's the Missouri
And they
Compromise.
drew the line, the 3630 parallel. Anything come below here, slave.
Right.
Anything come above here is free.
Okay.
But
Now
here's the
California, they don't have a slave compartment.
They don't have a state to bring in. So this is the compromise that allows them to come in. Because remember, the South then and now often controls the federal elections. Because if you don't get the South, you better get everything but the South. It's very important. So here's the compromise. The United States Congress passes and the president signs something called the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act says if they catch you anywhere in the United States of America and the person says that you were a slave and you escaped, that means that you can be returned to slavery. 1850 makes the entire country unsafe. Because remember,
for black people, because they were also capturing people who were free, like Samuel Northup. Samuel from 12 Years a Slave.
From 12
That's a
Years
true
a Slave.
story. The book is better
Connected.
than the movie. Let me just say that. The book, they were snatching people up and putting them back into bondage, putting them into bondage. People who had never been born into bondage. So it was unsafe for all black people. It
was always unsafe. And everybody listening, please pay very specific attention to what Professor Hunter just said, what Karen just said. You weren't safe in the United States anyway. As you said, 12 Years a Slave, I'm not a big Steve McQueen fan anyway, but the book, read Solomon Northup's Odyssey. As you say, Northup's in New York. This man playing the fellow, next thing you know, he's in Louisiana, bro. They got him in a slave prison in Alexandria, Virginia, across the river here from DC. Next thing you know, he in Louisiana for 12 straight years. What happened? You're not safe. But in 1850, oh, now it's worse. Somebody knock on your door like Henry Highland Garnett, who was another contemporary of Henry Bibb and Martin Delaney and Harriet Tubman and all them. Garnett was a young boy. He was working out of New York City on the ships. He came home one day, found out the so-called pattern rollers, the slave catchers that knocked on his door, asking his daddy for papers. They chased him all out the house. His family gets sold back into slavery. But the whole thing is, even if you got papers, to the point you're raising, Karen, they don't care. They snatching everybody in Philly.
Because of Dred Scott?
1857. There it is. 7 years after the Fugitive Slave Law. Dred and Harriet Scott, their two children, Dred and Harriet Scott, are in Fort Snelling in Minnesota, the upper Mississippi. You can't go no further north going into Canada. That is a free territory. They come back into Missouri, slave state. Dred and Harriet Scott sue for their freedom. The Supreme Court said, hold on, Chief. There's two types of citizenship in America. One, you're a citizen of a state. The other, you're a citizen of the United States. This is the legal fiction that persists to this day. This is why this COVID-19 thing is such a mess. How the hell are you gonna be a citizen of the United States and not a citizen of a state, but I'm living in a state? Oh, don't worry about it. We're doing this to establish, to Tani's point, that everybody black knows, if they know anything about Dred Scott, when they say a black person don't have any rights, a white person is bound to respect, that means that if you are in a free state, like Maine or New York by now, or some of these other, if you are in a free state, and I come up to you and say, where are your papers, Hunter? And you say, ain't got no papers. I ain't know, because I ain't never been on slave. Come with me, Hunter. And they take you, and you in Alabama or Mississippi. What Tani is saying is, Supreme Court says there are no rights that you have, Negro, in any state you're in that trump the right to the federal government. And if y'all want to put it in 2020 terms, ask yourself this question. All these people talking about states' rights, and all these people talking about yelling at state capitals, we want freedom and all this kind of thing. At what point do they decide that the rights of a state are trumped by the United States? The fugitive slave law. The fugitive slave law ain't no states' rights thing. If you were for states' rights, shouldn't you be for states' rights in Michigan? If they say, I'm in Michigan, it's a free state, you can't come up here. Oh no, you wanted the federal government to invade when they were snatching black people out of one state and taking them somewhere else. So it's very important to understand that as a legal principle. Henry Bibb, after the Fugitive Slave Act, Bibb is like, told y'all, deuces. Bibb moves to Canada. Yes. Bibb saying no place safe. In fact, I love it. We know the Iron Curtain from World War II. These Negroes in the abolitionist movement, they call it the Cotton Curtain. They say, we're not going to live beneath the Cotton Curtain. And after 1850, they say that Cotton Curtain is inching north, is really south of the American border. So now he's in Canada. And mind you, Henry Bibb, as you say, born in 1815, he only lives to 1854. So when you add, Bibb dies before his 40th birthday. In fact, he's 39, same as Martin, same as Malcolm. He's in his late 30s. Wow. He's in Canada duking it out with other black people who moved over there. None more important than another incredible journalist. Woman had a law degree from Howard University, Mary Ann Shadd Carey. Mary Ann Shadd Carey.
Why don't I know that name? Mary Ann. No, oh my God, we're gonna have to do a whole thing. Mary Ann Shadd.
Shadd, S-H-A-D-D, Carey, C-A-R-Y. Mary Ann Shadd Carey. Oh, you gonna love her. Another Mary Ann Shadd Carey. Mind you, this is the generation before Ida Bell Wells. She's got a newspaper. Mary Ann Shadd Carey is like, look, I'm an integrationist. I think black people can live with white people, but I think we need to have all our rights. So that's her position. And meanwhile, you got our man saying, Bibb is like, yeah, I don't think we need to be living with black people, with white people. We need to have our own black towns. Then he starts that newspaper, The Voice of the Fugitive. He said, we are fugitives. Then he starts an organization he heads called the Refugee Society. So they're looking at enslaved people. Like we see now, we see people fighting immigration, deportation. People say, these are immigrants versus black people. No, go study. There was a time when our people looked at enslavement and looked at our condition, and we called ourselves refugees. And so he says, if you can get to Canada, you join us. We in the Refugee Association. Another thing, and my friend Cheryl LaRoche wrote a book about this, actually talking about free societies in the Midwest. Remember, we talked about Kentucky, where Bibb was born. Ohio, if you get to Ohio, you might have a chance. All through the Midwest. Tying back to your AME church roots, thinking about your father, Allen University, Dave Chappelle's grandfather. The AME church, which is established on the East Coast out of Philly, Richard and Sarah Allen, the first bishop of the AME church, Richard Allen. The second bishop of the AME church is out of South Carolina. He's named Morris Brown, the only school in Atlanta University Center named for a black person, Morris Brown. And if you've ever been to Allen or ever been to Metropolitan AME Church, if you look in the stained glass windows of the AME Church and the AME Church schools, they name all those bishops. And you see the names of these institution builders. Morris Brown, the great Paul Quinn College, still in Texas. Richard Allen, Allen University in South Carolina. At any rate, when they start on the East Coast, then Paul Quinn and others move out to the Midwest. They set up these little AME churches. They set up these little AME churches in these little black places. Those places double as stations on the Underground Railroad. So there's this.
I was just talking, we have these debates about the church, the power of the church. And we should have a conversation about that another time. But I can never disrespect the church because as an institution, it had a purpose. And I wish we would get back to it.
That's right.
I wish we would get back to it. They were powerful, powerful building blocks for us. They were. I don't know how they lost their way. I don't know what happened.
Some of it is amnesia. The thing you're curing now, the thing we're talking about now. When you don't remember, you may act differently. And then some of them maintain that independence. The AME Church has been an institution that has been unwavering in some ways, but then they have other issues. But one thing's for sure, as you're saying, we have to study the Black church differently. We can't begin with the music and the mega church and the gospel of prosperity. No, you got to go back, because if it weren't for the AME Church, a lot of people wouldn't have escaped an Underground Railroad. Henry Bibb wouldn't have been helped in the same way. You wouldn't have seen that Midwest thrust through Ohio and Michigan. They wouldn't have gotten there. And so you have to go back to that. In fact, the roots of the AME Church, in fact, it's, like I said, it's a conversation for another day, but the Free African Society in Philadelphia, 1787, it is Sarah Allen and Richard Allen and those people congregated around that what become the AME Church that helped intervene in the yellow fever epidemic of Philadelphia. In other words, I mean, so we're talking about coronavirus. Wow. Go back to the church. And these Black people who are in harm's way, the essential workers of the 18th century, if you will, who are in the way. And Philadelphia says, you know what, if it weren't for these Negroes, we wouldn't have had no city. I mean, it's very important to understand Black institutions. So Bibb is in Canada. It's 1850 now, after 1850. He spends the last 4 years of his life building those independent institutions. And it's very important then to understand. But that's why I mentioned Herb Boyd, because Boyd writes about that debate in Black Detroit. But it's important to understand then that Bibb, arguing with Mary Ann Shadd Cary, also arguing with, but also supporting one of his great friends, and I think this is a brother who we really need to study a lot more, the great Martin Robeson Delaney. Martin Delaney was on the side of building Black institutions. In fact, Frederick Douglass and Martin Delaney were partners on the North Star newspaper. We know the name Frederick Douglass, but what we don't know is that Martin Delaney, in fact, Douglass said this about Delaney. Douglass said, you know, every day I get up and thank God he made me a man. But he says every day Delaney gets up, he thanks God he made him a Black man. That was Delaney was always race first. Delaney went to Africa. He went looking for play. He told the Nigerians, you know what, we can grow cotton over here and corner the cotton market. This is 1859. This is before the Civil War jumps out. So Bibb is part of this argument over what Black people should do. And by the time he draws his last breath in Ontario, Canada, Henry Bibb has become, with Josiah Henson and Mary Ann Shadd Cary and all the people who, if you want to read more about them, you can read. There's a 5-volume set called The Black Abolitionist Papers. It was edited by Peter Ripley. Interestingly enough, Ripley was aided over the years by a sister named Dorothy Porter Wesley, because she knew where all the documents were. But at any rate, if you read The Black Abolitionist Papers, if you read Carter G. Woodson, he edited a book called The Mind of the Negro, as revealed in his letters. He did another big book called Negro Orators and Their Oratory. You can read the speeches of Bibb and Delaney and Shadd. You can read the newspaper articles of all these people. And you see, not in 2020, not in the 1970s or 60s, not in the Harlem Renaissance, New Negro of the 1920s, but in the 1840s and 50s, they're debating, should we leave? Should we go to Africa? Should we go to Haiti? His friend Bishop James Theodore Holly says, let's just go to Haiti. We can get to Haiti. And he moves to Haiti. Should we go to Canada? Some of them say, we're going to stay here. But if we're going to stay here, damn it, we're going to be free. That's Frederick Douglass. And so Bibb operates in that field of Black abolitionists, and he's a name that more of us should know. And because you decided that we should talk about him in this piece, I think now more people are going to be like, you know what, I got to go read Henry Bibb's narrative. So I appreciate you bringing him up.
Listen, I've actually read, I have a young lady from Howard, Shayla, who's writing for me in the hub.news, which is, I just, you know, Juneteenth, a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted us to have an outlet for, in my mind, Black diasporic news, right? Stuff that's going on. And now it's turned into like history pieces. So she wrote a piece about Henry Bibb. And I was like, so there was someone before Harriet Tubman? Yeah. And I was like, so I sent you a text. I was like, we got to talk about him. And then I forgot why until you brought it up. So let me thank you. You know, this is important. And again, you know, we're putting breadcrumbs. Hopefully, you know, folks, if you're interested, you're going to do the work and read up on your own. These are just, you know, bricks, foundational pieces, maybe some cornerstones, but we got to do the work to build the rest of it in and not leave it incomplete. But
Karen, I should mention this. It reminded me, because again, I'm going just from memory. Peter Ripley's 5 volumes, The Black Abolitionist Papers, there's a 1-volume piece you can get to kind of condenses some of the more important ones, but it wasn't Ripley, it was Howard Bell who was a generation before Peter Ripley, who edited a book on the Negro convention movements of the 1840s. That was the one that Miss Porter helped. But of course, the librarians need to do. I just want to make that correction, because I hope somebody watching this will say, "Nah, it wasn't Ripley, it was Bell." Because again, we got to engage each other in this conversation.
Yeah.
So
And
thank you.
listen, I mean, and that's part of the discourse. You know, it's not about being right either.
Right.
You know? It's about learning. You know, I'm reading now all of these conventions that Black people had to talk about Black power. Because, you know, we just think it started with, you know, in 1960s or 1950s, or, you know, the civil rights movement or the Black Panther Party. No, we've been having conventions. It wasn't just W.E.B. and Booker T. And there have been people, Nannie Helen Burroughs or whatever. There have been people talking about this since before we got here. And I want to take some of this conversation across the continent, and not just in Egypt.
Okay.
Before Egypt,
of course.
Before Egypt, there were Nubians doing, like, Egyptians were informed by, you know how the Bible says this person begat, this person begat. Let's go back to the begat, the first begat.
Yes.
You know, but I'm so, I texted you, I'm so giddy. You know, I look forward to Saturday, because I'm like, I'm about to learn some stuff, and I'm so grateful. And I got like excited last night. I'm like, oh, we talking to Dr. Greg Carr today. So let me just thank you for.
I share that giddiness and that enthusiasm. Thank you, because I'm excited, not only the prospects of what we're doing, but what it's going to trigger in the minds of particularly our young. This is what you're going to do. We need an army. So I'm giddy too. I'm right with you.
I agree. I agree. All right, y'all, subscribe to this channel, like it, give us a thumbs up, and we'll keep doing it as long as we got breath in our body. So let me just say that, and we need to have breath in our body at least for the next 100 years. I'm claiming that. We need 100 years of good health, Greg Carr, to keep doing this, because I don't think there's enough time in the day. 100 more years we need. All right, thank you.
100 more years. Thank you
so much. All right, we'll be back next time.